Welcome to another live stream, and welcome to the NFL offseason, where we have time to reflect, gather our conclusions, and get better for next year. We're here to help you study over your opponent, who's probably sleeping, not thinking about fantasy right now, and watching college basketball like some lame-o. I'm just kidding. I'm a big basketball fan. Badgers are doing pretty well, 3-0 in conference, playing Ohio State tonight, I believe. But if it is your first time here, I am Cory. This is Armchair Fantasy Football. And for all intents and purposes, this is essentially a Dynasty fantasy football channel for, let's call it, the next 6 months. What is Dynasty, you may ask? We're going to be introducing that concept to you essentially throughout the next 6 months. But the first most important part about Dynasty fantasy football is kind of reflecting, getting some lessons learned. That's what we're going to go over here in a moment, and really learning from 2023 and taking those lessons and those principles and those aspects in fantasy into 2024. I cannot go any further without shouting out 2 links in our description. First one, Armchair Fantasy Football merch. If you have not even looked at that, no clue what you're doing. Second one, and probably a more important one, if you don't want to spend any money on merch at the moment, I understand. We do have a Discord, so you probably got the alert an hour, 30 minutes, 15 minutes, and then when I went live, in terms of when you can catch me in real action, if you want even more of a heads up, we do have a Discord. It is free. Link is in the description below. We've got a general chat, start, sit. You name it, we've got it. We do general announcements as well, and we kind of just do research and talk about fantasy. So if that interests you, we have the link in the description for that. Today we're doing something I've never done under the name Armchair Fantasy Football. Way back when, if you are a day one, and I mean a day one, this was actually a video podcast for all things sports, and we were called Armchair Athletes. For the sake of convenience, this little logo you see in the top left corner, I have not changed. Well, then I kind of went into a niche and decided to go into fantasy football, dive hard into it. You guys have responded in resounding fashion. But since we shifted to fantasy, it's just been me talking until today. So allow me to introduce you to our first guest. He's a sports broadcaster, director, and close follower of the fantasy space. We have Dylan Przybylski. Dylan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Like you said, yeah, I love fantasy football. I took second and third in money leagues this year, so I know what I'm talking about. And like you mentioned, I'm a sports broadcaster, the sports director here at Oshkosh, and that's actually how me and Cory met, was through UW Oshkosh.
Yeah, so me and Dylan go not way back, but I'd say about 2 years back now. He's a sophomore at Oshkosh, sports director, taking over the position I had last year. He knows his stuff, folks. I would not put somebody on this show if they did not, and we talk fantasy on the side a lot. I see Praise in the chat. What's going on? MA football guy, or Andy, you just told me your name, in 2 Dynasty leagues. Well, Andy, you're going to want to hang around. Make sure you leave a like. I know you're already subscribed. It says, Dylan, you sound like me. All right, Dylan. Well, you have a very common voice, apparently. So Andy's in here. Andy is a day one-er, a diehard for sure. So yeah, folks, any questions you have, here's how today's essentially going to go. We're going to get to know Dylan a little bit more, and then we're going to pass things back and forth in terms of lessons that we learned in 2023 and what we can take into 2024. But in the meantime, I need you to stack as many questions as you can in that chat. Of course, like, of course, subscribe. We hit 900 and then we lost one last night. So if you can get us back to 900, that would be phenomenal. So Dylan, UW Oshkosh, director, broadcaster. I know this stuff. I know when you started fantasy, but how about you share that with everybody else? I think the age you started at is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, so my dad was a huge fantasy guy, so to me, it was kind of like the family business hopping into fantasy football. Like when it's football season, it's serious. So my dad got me and my brother started at 3rd grade. So that's about 11, 12 years old is when I started playing fantasy football. And then it wasn't until about 7th grade where I hit my big league, where it's been a money league every year. Same group of guys, maybe 2 people have changed, but it's been a 10-year league now, and it's pretty much been the same like group of guys that have done it. And I've won twice in that league. I've took second 3 times, and I took third 2 times. So pretty successful in that league. So yeah, that's my fantasy football outlook.
That's a pretty good track record for the most part. Yeah, I started in like 6th grade, so you've got some years on me. Pray that is definitely a joke, but there's someone in the chat, Dylan, that wants to know Christian McCaffrey or Cam Akers. That's a tough one.
You gotta start CMC.
Okay, good. All right. So We kind of got to know Dylan a little bit here, and you said this season took third and second. The 10-year league, just out of curiosity, is that Dynasty or is that like new draft every year?
That's a new draft every year.
Okay. Those are fun.
Dynasty is something I haven't done yet, but I'd like to get into it. And I'm actually thinking about making a Dynasty league with some of my college friends right now. So that'd be kind of cool to start up.
For sure, yeah. And different Dynasty leagues have different formats, right? There's some. I'm in one right now. There are 20 keepers, so that is like you are a general manager. And then you can only draft rookies. So really like embracing that managerial aspect. So that one's going to be fun. I really was kind of watching the college football playoff closely for that. Otherwise, I don't have too much incentive. Dylan and I are Wisconsin Badgers fans, so it has been rough this year. So not too much incentive to watch college football. But all right, now that we've established today is kind of a tag team effort, we will get into our lessons learned. Again, pop those questions in the chat below. Prace had to test his knowledge. All right, I'm glad that your knowledge test was CMC or Cam Akers. That's fair, Pray. If you've got anything else, feel free to let us know. As for anybody else watching or listening to the stream, I'll kick us off here, Dylan. We'll go back and forth. I'm a Bears fan. Those of you who follow this know that. If you don't know it, now you do. I will wholeheartedly admit Jordan Love is exactly what you want in a Dynasty quarterback. In Dynasty, you are looking for the future. You know, you're not redrafting everybody. Some have, call it 5 keepers. Some have elaborate schemes where it's like the league I'm in, 20 keepers, and then you go after rookies. I don't really care. Jordan Love, regardless of your format, if you can get him or if you have him, keep him. If you can get him, go after him. The price just went up, obviously. A couple reasons I like Jordan Love. We look at his year, 32 passing touchdowns, 4,100 passing yards with the youngest receiving core in the league. Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dontavion Wicks, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. These are not household names. They weren't, at least, too long ago. Now they're starting to become more well-known. This offense, naturally, will only get more and more reps. And I'm not sure that's going to, equal wins. How is the NFC North going to respond? So far, it's kind of crickets outside of the Lions. What I do know is more experience, more first-team reps for Jordan Love. He's been sitting for the last 3 years. We've got the cornerstone of Aaron Jones. He is 29 years old. Pretty old for a running back, but obviously when he's healthy, he looks good. In my opinion, if Jones, let's say, leaves, there's Eric Berlin. If Jones leaves, it's more of an emphasis on the pass. So I guess just your general thoughts on Jordan Love, Dylan. Is the future bright? It looks bright to me.
As a Packer fan, the future is very bright.
Right.
It seems that we've got another quarterback for our 15-year stretch, whatever it may be, with J-Love, but I'm excited for J-Love. And like you said, the youngest receiving core, it only produces more upside. That offense is going to gel even more. Quarterback will get better repertoire with the receivers and rapport, especially J-Love with Jaden Reed. Unbelievable year for Jaden Reed. He took that #1 role.
I mean, in all honesty, I look at Jaden Reed and I don't want to make like crazy comparisons. It's kind of the same structure, same build, same usage model as Deebo Samuel. You've got him on these reverse jet sweeps. You're using him in the passing game. You're using him all over. That's kind of what they were doing specifically when you had A.J. Dillon down. Aaron Jones was down. I believe they were down to that Emmanuel Wilson kid for a bit. He had a scary injury. So, yeah, I mean, seeing his utilization in the run game is for sure good. We'll catch up with the chat here. Andy's saying, born and raised in Massachusetts, but somehow you sound like a Midwesterner. I like it. Does Dameon Pierce sound good for a 5th-round Dynasty pick? Asking you, Dylan. What do you think for value? Otherwise, I can kind of touch on it since I've been playing Dynasty a bit.
Honestly, it depends what your Dynasty league is. If it's a huge keeper, I would maybe stick with Pierce, but that Houston offense is so shaky, I might take that 5th-round pick.
Right. I'd probably lean 5th-rounder, so if you're trying to ditch Pierce and you can get him for a 5th-rounder, that's good with me. Another thing to really point out, yes, Dameon Pierce had a promising rookie year, but this past year, Devin Singletary actually took the touches away from him the last few weeks, so I got to agree with you on that one. Definitely kind of a turnover in terms of the RB1. Running back is a very complex position right now, and we will cover that for sure. MA Football Guy also saying, I've already got Lamar. Should I take J Love too? Not if you're giving up too much of your... If you have to dig into your wide receiver or running back depth, I wouldn't. I love Jordan Love, but I think Lamar is one of those exceptions. Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. Maybe you don't need to break the bank for him unless it is a 2-quarterback league. Eric Berlin, as he usually is, injecting his opinions into our chat. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thanks for joining in, man. MA Football Guy also saying, Oh, ask the same question there. You are good. Johnny's in here. Nice to see you. Need to get into the Dynasty lane. Redraft PPR with friends and family gets boring to me. Little to no deals each time. That's the thing, Johnny, and Dylan, you'll notice this too if you join Dynasty. The whole my league doesn't trade mantra, that goes out the window because you have draft picks. You have people who are 2-9 and know their season's over. All of a sudden, if they're trying to plan for the future and you're, 7-6, 7-5, there might be a deal to be made there. All right. And then Andy's saying Connecticut River Valley sounds like the Midwest. So if I go to the East Coast right now, I better hear a bunch of Wisconsinites. That's what I'm hearing. All right. That's fair. Break the bank, not a money league. That's fair. Okay. So Jordan Love looks like the future is bright. Dylan, we will go to your first point. And this kind of just pertains to fantasy in general. It certainly does relate to Dynasty. What's going on with tight ends right now?
Yeah, so first off, TJ Hawkinson had a huge year, barring that injury. He was the number one ranked tight end in all leagues, especially PPR, which is the standard that I play. So I would watch out for him. I don't know if he's going to be healthy by the time next season starts. It was an MCL tear, so he might be someone that you want to store on your bench for a little bit, maybe trade away as some bait. But I would sit on Hawkinson for right now if you're going to keep him on your team. Laporta had a huge year, and really it was just a breakout year for a lot of tight ends. Laporta, Tucker Kraft is someone I'm looking at for the future side. Evan Ingram really took his strides this year with Jacksonville. And even David Njoku had a huge year with the Browns, and I think that was a little bit of the resurgence of Joe Flacco. Yeah. And then in the Dynasty, if you're looking at rookies, Brock Bowers entering the league, he's projected to be taken by the Giants as of right now, and I like that if he goes to the Giants because that offense is quite young, and Daniel Jones loves his tight ends. He threw a lot to Evan Ingram, so we'll see what that entails.
Yeah, and I just noticed, Andy, you're saying break the bank. What do you mean, not a money league? By break the bank, I mean don't, dig out of value from another position. So don't go, ditching CeeDee Lamb for Jordan Love if you have Lamar. That's what I meant to clarify there. I agree. Definitely good guys to watch. You and I were talking before we went on the air, Dylan, Iowa's tight ends university. So if you find someone emerging from there in the future and you're a diehard Dynasty player and you want to look into the rookie class and kind of claim somebody beforehand, I would not advise taking a rookie before you know who they're drafted by, but if you're going to go on that limb, Iowa tight end's pretty reliable for the most part. TJ Hawkinson's interesting, right? Because Kirk's got the extra year possibly. He's injured. We don't know what the demand really is for him in the free agency market right now. I would argue it's pretty good because there's a lot of shaky quarterback play. As a Chicago fan, I would know the definition of that for the duration of my life, right? But so you've got Justin Jefferson as the primary target. You've got Jordan Addison coming out as a first rounder who either nearly had a 1,000-yard season or was pretty close. And then you've got Hawk. Plenty of usage for him. Kind of a scary injury with the knee. And Laporta went down as well. So I agree in general, though. And I do like, believe it or not, that you didn't bring up Travis Kelce because in Dynasty, you're looking for the future. Kelce's knocking on the door of 35. His usage actually went down this year, and he missed a couple games. So I like the youth. I like the fact we're going for people who we know are going to be around for a while. That's good stuff. All right, we will go to point number 3, or my point number 2. Game script is king. I am not referring to the conspiracy theorists out there who believe the NFL is rigged. That's your own opinion. All right, game script, what I mean by that is certain outcomes in a game, certain situations in a game are going to dictate what happens on the field. If you are up 33-0 and you're in the middle of the fourth quarter, I'm going to bet the house you're running it because you're trying to run the clock out. And with the inconsistency of certain running back situations, we can kind of dive into that. So, game script reigns supreme, specifically with running backs. Here's a stat for you. 9 of the top 12 running backs in PPR played for winning teams this year. This is a trend that we consistently see. There's increased importance with this point again, with not as many workload backs out there anymore, workhorse backs. Derrick Henry looks like he just about hung it up, at least in Tennessee. We'll see if he tests the market. Lots of split carries, though. I mean, Dylan, you're a Packers fan. You've seen it for years with A.J. Dillon, kind of taking the touchdowns, the short yardage situations, and then Jones is going to take you through the 20s. So really, if you need volume in rushing, go after a winning team. Joe Mixon has been reliant for years. Is he the most efficient? No, but he's going to get 20 carries in a game because the Bengals, apparently with or without Joe Burrow, are good, right? They went 9-8, surprisingly, with Jake Browning. So You can also catch on to trends throughout the season. I'm a big stats guy in general. You can go 8, 9, 10 weeks into the season to start to look, okay, run-pass ratio. Who's really leaning on the run right now? Obviously the Eagles, and, that counts with the tush-push and everything else. There are some other run-heavy teams out there. The Bears still stick in that lane. I think the Packers would have been a more run-heavy team this year if not for the injuries, because that's where the veterans are, right? But I don't know. General thoughts on this? You and I were talking before. Running backs are kind of shaky, but...
Yeah, even Mixon is very shaky as a running back too. Like, very inconsistent. I had him this year. Just, if you don't have one of the top running backs, it's kind of like, well, who do I go after now?
Right.
Like, I had David Montgomery starting in most of my leagues, and even him, he's not a viable running back option. Like, he's not the one option anymore. We'll get into that a little bit later, but he's still a running back that you can kind of rely on because he's going to get 60 yards, at least 10 carries, and maybe a touchdown.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Even by my theory, which kind of works, and then we'll get to the chat here. Eric is going nuts with the game script theory. Even with my hypothesis here, right? The Eagles look like one of the strongest teams throughout the year. They had one of the best records until they really kind of fell apart towards the end due to injuries, inconsistencies, and the whole 9 yards. By my logic, high amount of rushing, a team that won a lot of games still. They won 11-6. DeAndre Swift should have been further up there. But then you've got the tush-push evolving. And then you have supplemental running backs like Kenneth Gainwell. And Boston Scott runs in there once in a while. Yeah, it's a really volatile position. We're going here. Andy, all right, you got me clarifying there. Johnny brings up a great point, even with tight ends, widely inconsistent if you don't have George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, and arguably Jake Ferguson. And we could add Sam Laporta in there as well. It's a tough call. I'll agree there's still a pretty sharp drop-off. I would even sneak Cole Kmet in there as a consistent top 10. He has been the last couple of years. But you're right. Especially teams that like to run, 2 tight end sets. They're out there as decoys, blockers. Laporta's pretty consistent too. Yep. Great point. Eric's saying playoff matchups are oddly suspicious. Deshaun Watson Bowl. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And the Joe Flacco homecoming possibly as well if he plays the Ravens next week. Matt Stafford Bowl. Tyreek back to Kansas City. He's getting a warm welcome, by the way, and I mean that very sarcastically. It's going to be like 0 degrees. Dallas and Green Bay with their playoff history and the McCarthy Bowl. And a potential Flacco back to... Okay, you got all the bases covered. Script writer cooked. If there is a script writer out there, they threw everything at the wall and it stuck. So, yeah. On a real note, Laporta is the tight end of the future. Mad consistent in that offense. I agree. I believe Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond are both free agents. Fact check me on that for sure if you want to in the chat. So if you're looking for that secondary option to Amon-Ra St. Brown, you've got it there. Drafting CMC no matter what. Can't blame you. In a couple years, we might not be doing that. He's getting up there in age for a running back. But one last thing here as we talk about running backs. I think, and I'm sure you've done this a lot, it's a great practice Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Submit those waiver claims and get them in. If there is a position to do it, specifically with how injury-prone running backs are, how much contact they take, and the fact you really don't have a bell cow back out there anymore, running backs are where you should be looking for the next guy. Perfect example. How many of you drafted Kyron Williams in the second round this year? You didn't, right? He completely took over that backfield. So, great point. Inconsistent position. We can use game script, whether you want to interpret it with what Eric said or what I said to kind of predict it. But that is my second point. Dylan, what you got with Chicago?
Yeah, there's some Chicago chaos, as you probably know, Cory, and so does Eric, being Bears fans. So what should you do with Justin Fields with the Bears getting the number 1 pick and not knowing if they're going to keep Fields or pay him in the near future? And Chicago could potentially draft Caleb Williams. And what should you do with Fields if he is traded? I would honestly hold on to Fields. The potential markets for Fields include Atlanta, Seattle, and Washington. Seattle is looking for a new coach. Atlanta is now looking for a new coach. And Washington is looking for a new coach. Pittsburgh is a sleeper team, in my opinion. Mike Tomlin, historically, one of the greatest coaches of all time, never has a losing season. So he could be a sleeper. Team to look out for would be Pittsburgh. But I really like Atlanta because if Fields goes to Atlanta, There's rumors that Belichick is going to follow to Atlanta, and then you already have weapons there that Fields can capitalize on, especially with Bijan there, an established running back that's ran the ball well. You can do so many fun RPO plays with those two that I think Fields would be a potentially really good quarterback to hold on to in your dynasty leagues, or as trade bait, you can really get some good value out of him if he does go to Atlanta, but it all depends on what happens and what the Bears would do.
Right, and then what risks do you run if you keep him and he goes to a worse situation? If he goes to Washington, I don't know if you get a 4th or 5th rounder for him in Dynasty. And again, it really depends, right? Like, what's your format? How many teams are in your league? Atlanta, I think, is the best scenario. I like your hypothesis there. Eric says, here we go. And then we'll catch up with what you said in a moment, Johnny. Interesting part there, right? Read option or triple option or any type of RPO with Bijan is the dream. If he goes to Pittsburgh, I would argue he's in a decent spot as well. Has the offense been great? No. Was Matt Canada a big part of that? I would argue yes. An O coordinator means a heck of a lot, right, for a team's success on offense, of course. I mean, I still think that Pittsburgh's kind of a sleeper because you could get Justin Fields out there with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. You've got a change of pace back there as well. You kind of have, in my opinion, and I won't dip too much into your waters with what you're going to say about Detroit, a changing of the guard at running back. I think this is Jaylen Warren's backfield. Different conversation there for sure. But yeah, I think if Fields goes to Atlanta or, Pittsburgh, and if you can kind of get a jump on that, maybe there's good value there and you want to hold on to it. If you're worried Chicago ditches him, if they hold on to him, ideally the situation does not get worse. But if they ditch him to somebody like Washington or, God forbid, the Patriots. I don't see that happening. I think they draft, but then you're in kind of a pickle. So if you're worried about a couple of those destinations that maybe don't have a lot of assets, sure. Interesting thing here, right? What if we have DJ Moore? The chemistry between Justin Fields and DJ Moore has been around a top 10 wide receiver pretty much all year. What happens if you throw a Caleb Williams or a Drake May? I don't even want to put that in the universe, but he goes in there. You have potentially some new chemistry. Or what happens if they trade that first overall pick, they go down to number 2 or 3, and now you have Marvin Harrison Jr. taking some targets away? I think DJ Moore is a very interesting scenario where, maybe he ends up being wide receiver 20 if they go out and get Marvin Harrison. Maybe he ends up being wide receiver 5 if they keep Fields and do something else where they all of a sudden don't have to completely reset. So that's a stacked one. Chicago is going to be very busy between now and April.
Yeah, and that's kind of the talk of like the whole offseason is what are the Bears going to do? And the reason I like Fields to Atlanta is not only that the offensive weapons are there, but it's also because I don't really think Ritter is the guy there.
100%.
I don't think he's the quarterback.
100%. And you can kind of see the lack of confidence, right? I think Taylor Heineke had 2 different shots at it, and, Arthur Smith's a whole other thing. He's gone now, so... yeah, but there's also an argument to be made. The coaching can't get any worse. So you've got Desmond Ritter having a lackluster couple of years. You've got Arthur Smith being out of there. Fields is from Georgia, too, so that would actually make a lot of sense. I think he'd be back home. He'd be happy. He initially went to college in Georgia and then transferred to OSU. Johnny's saying, it's funny, I streamed tight ends all season, revolving door of Njoku, Ingram, and Kmet. Thank God I drafted Ferguson in the last round this past season. If you got Jake Ferguson in the last round, that's somebody whose praises we were singing. I didn't think he was going to do this good, but historically, right, Jason Witten goes off, Dalton Schultz goes off and develops and did well in Houston this year. Those Dallas tight ends, man, right? It's kind of like the NFL version of Iowa. You're going to get production. Eric, let us know how sick you are of the Chicago situation right now. 7-10 is an improvement, man, but yeah, we've got some drama for sure. We will proceed on to my next point. Speaking of Justin Fields, lead into mobile quarterbacks. Rushing upside is something I think isn't slept on, but it's really important if you're in that default scoring format for quarterbacks. What am I talking about? If you would like a point, good sir, you are going to need them to pass for 25 yards. They could have a 300-yard passing game, 1 touchdown if it's a 4-point format, and you're looking at 16 points. Is that a great scenario? No. Is it horrible? Oh, boy, Andy, I'll get into that in a sec. I forget you're a Patriots fan. 25 yards to score 1 point. Where am I going with this? Each turnover loses 2 points. That means you need 50 passing yards to make up for that interception, that lost fumble, or 20 rushing yards. Let's go through a little case study here. We start with the great Matthew Stafford ahead of his matchup against the Lions. Terrific volume passer, consistently hovers around that 4,000 passing yards mark. Where most of us are Stafford guys, right? We would take him. Relatively healthy this year. Just missed a couple of games. Out of the 8 games where Matthew Stafford threw 1 interception, he hit 20 fantasy points one time. All right, 1 for 8. Looking at like 12.5%. Let's go to Jalen Hurts. Career high in turnovers this year, 19. He had 11 games where he threw a pick. Guess what? He hit 20 fantasy points in 6 of them. 6 for 11. Over 50%. Matthew Stafford, much better volume passer, I would definitely argue, especially with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. 1 for 6. So 1 turnover, 1 for 6. 1 turnover, 6 for 11. What's the difference, you may ask? So Hurts had 19 turnovers. Stafford had 11. Jalen Hurts was quarterback 2. Stafford was 15. I would say it's the rushing upside. Stafford doesn't really strike me as the I'm going to go out and run for 50 yards type. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts, despite the fact he had a career high in turnovers this year, 15 rushing touchdowns. 15. And it's because of that broken play. But it works, right? And we love it in fantasy. Chat is blowing up right now. What do you make of the Getsy firing, Corey? It was warranted. All you have to do is look at that play where there was a screen pass on 3rd and 22, and then you'll see what I mean. TS is in here. Won my league. Thanks for the help this season. Anytime, man, if you're interested in Dynasty, that's what we're here for. We're also just kind of talking shop, preparing for 2024. If you're not a procrastinator like most of us are, you can study like 7 months ahead of time. So if you have any questions, feel free, or just want to brag and let us know what your team was. That's fine, too. Andy also won. Let's go. Heather's in here. How's it going? And then Eric says, lots of improvement, which I'm very happy. 3 losses that easily could have been wins. Yeah, I mean, Dylan, you're probably not tuned to Bears Twitter, but there's a large group of people out there that's pointing at the Broncos loss, the Lions loss, and the Browns loss with that Hail Mary that was right in the breadbasket of Darnell Mooney. In that scenario, we're 10-7, so maybe none of this happens. But yeah, so
And I don't know, man, but all I know is that Bears fans are praying for a Packer win, and they just can't get one.
No, yeah, I swear. It is insane. Yeah, I'm very, very upset right now. Well, because then there's people going like Ultimate Universe. They have Jordan Love. What happens? I honestly think we ruin him. 3 years of just sitting and watching a team that hasn't been able to develop a quarterback. Yeah, I don't know, right? Heather likes the double box. If you understand that term, shout out to you. That's director jargon right there. Eric says, Getsy gone. Hopefully bringing an offensive coordinator who can help develop a quarterback, whoever it ends up being. Solid game plan. That's my caveat. The Bears have never developed a great quarterback. Their best quarterback in history, who is he, Dylan? He was here about a decade ago. Who's the best quarterback in Bears history?
Jay.
Yep, Smokin' Jay Cutler. Did we draft Jay Cutler? No, we got him from the Broncos after he threw for volume and was a little established. My caveat for drafting a quarterback is getting a new offensive coordinator because I am not letting Luke Getsy mold anybody, all right? Now he can't. Thoughts on the Bears coaching staff firing? Yep, great question, Heather. Luke Getsy, I think the play calling has a lot to do with it. The next question the Bears have to ask themselves over the course of the next 3 months is, do we trust Justin Fields? Is Justin Fields still holding onto the ball too long? How are the turnover issues? Ultimately, what Chicago needs to be thinking, since they haven't pulled this thing off in what's about to be 40 years, is can we win a title with Justin Fields? And we better make that decision quick because his 4th and final year of his rookie contract, unless they want to extend him, is this year, and they have a heck of a lot of draft capital. They could go out and get a hard reset on a pretty talented quarterback. But then the question is, like Eric brought up, who's going to coach him? So, great questions. Can't forget I'm a Pats fan, Corey. Andy, I will try and watch my mouth. I'm just trying to find someone else who had a worse season than us, and it's a very small list. And not run 20 screens a game. One day, Dylan, one day we can forego the QB. Yeah, that's completely fair. So, kind of a long, extended topic. We were talking about Fields for a bit, but mobile quarterbacks are good. Jalen Hurts, career high in turnovers, and he scored the 2nd most amount of points behind guess who? Josh Allen, who runs a decent amount as well. Trust mobile quarterbacks, especially in your default scoring. They're going to get you some bonus points. Year of the wideouts. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was a big year for wideouts. CeeDee Lamb was huge. He led the league in PPR. And then Ty Hill was doing Tyreek Hill things. Just 2 solid wide receivers there. Someone on the rise was Amon-Ra this year. Mm-hmm. And I think him being snubbed of an All-Pro will cause him to be hungry next season. Something that also brings us up is There's a lot of question marks on if Josh Reynolds will come back to Detroit. And then one topic I want to bring up, Puka Nacua. Now, he had a huge year, but is this kind of a year like Cooper Kupp had? Is this going to be the same thing where, like, the next year his production value goes down?
That's fair. Kind of open that one up to the floor, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. If you have any takes on that in the chat, let us know. Is Puka, not a one-off, but are we going to see a dip in production? My somewhat counter to that, and it's more so just to further the discussion, Cooper Kupp is 30. Do we start to see some of the volume dedicated to Cooper Kupp, which is a ton, go to Puka? Puka's a great story. 5th rounder out of BYU. That's not exactly, NFL university. No offense, Zach Wilson. But, there's good examples out there for sure. I believe Taysom Hill was, you have to check me on that. I believe Taysom Hill was BYU. That's a good point. And also, you have to think about this. Did any defensive backs have Puka Nacua, circled going into their Week 7 matchup with him? Defensive coordinators weren't looking out for Puka. They were worried about Cooper Kupp. And if you're looking for a secondary target, what can we say? Tyler Higbee, I guess. Puka was not on the radar. So I think that's a pretty good topic to think about. Now that everyone knows about him, is he still going to be able to dice people up? Once Kupp came back, we saw they were sustainable. Personally, I think he's okay. I think any dip we could see in production, because people know about him now, could be made up for, because Cooper Kupp, especially with his injuries, is not going to be out there forever. Now, is Puka injury prone? He missed a couple games, so that's pretty good. Would you go after him in like Dynasty right now, or would you kind of wait to see, let me see a few weeks in his sophomore campaign and see if he's consistent? What would you do?
Honestly, if he's consistent, I'd play him just because he's consistent.
That's fair. And we saw week in, week out. He looked good. Let's see. Heather's saying, Eckler, talk about a disappointment. We will get to Eckler. Eckler was, I sat Eckler the last 3 weeks. Yeah. Did we think we'd be saying that this year? No. I mean, he was RB1 for a bit. That is something else. Oh my gosh. If we're good on this topic, are you good if I move on?
I just wanted to bring up one thing. If you are going to look at wideouts, I would strongly target Miami just because they do it right down there.
The weather, too.
Yep. Waddle and Hill, they just do it right down there. Waddle and Hill are arguably top 10 receivers in the league itself, barring fantasy. But even fantasy production, they both have high value in production.
Yeah, and remember not too long ago, people were calling Tua like noodle arm and saying his arm strength wasn't good. Yeah, that's completely gone now. If there was any question about Tua being able to push the ball vertically, there's not anymore. Waddle's an interesting one because Tyreek Hill did come out, I believe he was either gaming or he was on a podcast, and he said, once I am done in Miami, it's over. I am retiring relatively soon. Tyreek, I believe, is 30, so that shouldn't come as a shock. So Jalen Waddle in the future, unless they go out and get somebody else. Otherwise, like Braxton Berrios has been a really good weapon there for deeper leagues. I agree, Dylan. And like it's a warmer climate, so you're never really going to have those ugly games where it's snowing at home, where it's snowing and sleeting and all this other stuff, where you got to tuck the ball and run a ton, right? So good point there. So we've got Eckler. Talk about disappointment. We will get to him. He's actually our next topic, so great timing, Heather. And then Andy's saying, don't worry, man. We always picked on bad teams when we were good. Yeah, you were good for a long time. So, and then Eric's saying, I traded Eckler high, thought I was going to regret it, and actually ended off better without him. Eckler's at that interesting age, right? And then Andy's saying, one in my Eckler league, thanks to Gibbs and Breece Hall. Yeah, talk about a back of the future, as long as they can get some inkling of a quarterback over there. Funny you bring up Eckler. Father Time has arrived, right? So Father Time is somebody who caught up to Austin Eckler. He fell to the running back 27. He scored the 27th most amount of points in PPR. But Cory, he was hurt. He was hurt for 2 weeks. So that excuse is, I'm sorry. That's not going to be it. He was not efficient this year. Excuse I will grant him. The entire Chargers team apparently got mauled by Lions. Like Justin Herbert goes out with a few weeks to go. Mike Williams was out from the jump. Keenan Allen was out the last few weeks. Joshua Palmer was out. I mean, I don't know many teams out there who are down to their 4th wide receiver by the end of the year. Easton Stick comes in. You could argue, okay, all of these other guys who are taking up touches and targets, they're gone, so they got to go to Eckler, and they did, and he just wasn't very efficient. He turns 29 years old in May. If you're talking about a quarterback, this is your prime. If you're talking about a wide receiver or a running back, it's not. If you're talking about a tight end, Mercedes Lewis, yeah, that was the beginning of his prime. He's still chugging. So, turns 29 years old in May, does Eckler. Hasn't had a change of pace back along his side. Joshua Kelly doesn't count. There really hasn't been someone to take the workload off of him. And another one, Travis Kelce. Why am I panicking? Down to tight end 3. That's not really that crazy. He's been tight end 1 in, I think, every bit of the last 5 years. So 34 years old. Mahomes leaning off him a little bit. You talked about your tight ends before. I would lean harder into Laporta and Hockenson next year than I would Kelce. Thoughts on that? Agree, disagree?
I agree.
Yeah.
Me being a tight end guy, I love my tight ends. And just watching the Chiefs, it's like hard to watch. It's like their offense is completely different now. And I don't know if that's because of Taylor Swift or if it's just because there is no wideouts.
There it is. There it is.
But it doesn't look good. It doesn't look like the normal Chiefs that we've known for the last couple of years. It's kind of sad, honestly, because the Chiefs have been such a good team and a fun team to watch that it's just not the same, it feels like.
Right. And it's like, do they go out and get Malik Neighbors? Do they go out and invest? They didn't lose enough games to go up and get like a Marvin Harrison Jr. They'd have to trade the entire farm for him. So, yeah, it's like Rashee Rice. I'm a big fan of him, but I actually said this in a short not too long ago. He is not by any means, or no, I said this in a, nope, I won't spoil that. There's a video coming out tomorrow. Rashee Rice is brought up, so keep that in mind. He's not a game wrecker, though. I will say that. He is not your wide receiver 1. Juju, I don't think was the answer last year either. I'm very impressed. That's one of the more impressive Super Bowl runs, in my opinion, because outside of Travis Kelce, who the heck was Patrick Mahomes throwing to? There was no other 1,000-yard receiver. So, yeah, I mean, and now the only option there is Kelce, and what's the topic we're on? Father Time. It is kind of hard to watch. You know, Justin Fields, big issue with him. First it was the O-line, then it was he holds onto the ball too much. Patrick Mahomes is kind of going through a similar issue. He's way better. That's why his numbers haven't suffered. But he's holding the ball really long because no one's getting open. And when MVS gets open, he drops the ball. So, like, jokes aside, that happens a lot. So, lack of talent in the wide receiving core. Travis Kelce gone soon. If you're a Patrick Mahomes owner, do you have to start to ask yourself, is he really top 3? He'll probably always be top 5, top 7. But, I don't know, how far do you think he could fall if they don't get an answer?
I mean, I can see him like falling like top 10.
Yeah.
Like I honestly can, just because like when they had Tyreek Hill, you had a reliable guy. And then when he left, they thought bringing MVS, this deep threat, was going to change the game again. It didn't. It really didn't. Because like you said, MVS is a liability down the field. And that just really continues to drop it, Mahomes' value. And then when you see like Kelce getting older, and once Kelce retires, who's going to be there in Kansas City?
Yeah, you got to start to think, who's the next answer? I think it is drafting. I don't know what the free agent situation is right now. Jacoby Myers will be a free agent. We did a YouTube short on him a few days ago. There's not a lot, right? So you might have to go and draft high, spend that first-round pick, and it's not going to be a good first-round pick because Patrick Mahomes is that good and this team is that good, and Isaiah Pacheco, bless his heart, has been holding his own as well. Andy's saying Tua's got the wideouts. Don't get me going. I will not trigger the Patriots fan any further. All right, that's strike 2 on me. So Father Time is undefeated, has definitely approached, knocked on the door, and opened the door of guys like Austin Eckler and Travis Kelce. When we are talking Dynasty, these are people you want to avoid. Avoid meaning don't let them on your team? Not necessarily. If you're drafting and Travis Kelce falls to the 4th round, I'm probably going to grab him, but don't jump for him. Don't value him where he was before. Definitely don't take Austin Eckler with your first rounder after what we saw this year. All right, we will go to your next and final topic here, and then we'll keep answering questions, so pile them in the chat, of course. Fantasy issues with running backs. This is a hefty topic.
Yeah, so first off, CMC had a career year with no injury, but again, that's with no injury. This is the first full year we've actually seen him since, I believe, his rookie year.
It's been a while.
Even that, he was out maybe 1 or 2 games, but it's just been a rocky road for CMC. So I'm kind of lenient on like CMC because of how much value he does provide. But then you got to remember his injury history, and it just kind of doesn't sit well with me. two guys I see ceiling wise really high next year is Jahmyr Gibbs. He's gonna have a huge year next year because his production value started to overtake Montgomery midway of the year, and then he's been the number one back for most of the second half of the season. And then BJ Robinson's ceiling, it's gonna go up with the recent firing of a man who just can't understand how to work an offense, Art Smith.
Yep.
Miami has a double-headed monster with Raheem Mostert and Devon
Achane. Yep.
Achane.
Mhm.
Achane. I can never get his name right.
Good.
And then obviously we mentioned it earlier, Kyron Williams just having a huge year out of nowhere. Like who would expected Kyron Williams to just go off?
Right, because he was behind Cam Akers, week 1, and he was also behind Darrell Henderson, who I believe got dropped short after. I love that you brought up Miami because Raheem Mostert, roll back the tape, week 2 or 3, I'm all over social media going, oh my gosh, sell high on Raheem Mostert. He is a 31-year-old running back who has been hurt for the majority of his 8-year career. There is no way on earth he keeps this up for a full year. I was wrong. Fully wrong. Could not have been more wrong. He was rivaling CMC for touchdowns the whole year. What I will say, for Dynasty, you can bet if he keeps his production up, Devon Achane is the future of that backfield. And you mentioned before, Dylan, pass-heavy team. They push the ball vertically. Folks, if you're just joining in, I do want to kind of reset here. We're about 45 minutes in. This is Dylan, first guest on the Armchair Fantasy Football Show, if you will. Well, figured we'd go live. I'm not going to talk by myself for an hour. I know you guys keep me company, but having someone in here, getting the setup was nice. We are looking back at 2023, some lessons we learned, looking forward to 2024. If you're in Dynasty Fantasy Football and have questions, let me know. If you're just very nervous about a draft that's probably 6 months away, I guess I've been there. Let me know. In general, we're just looking towards the future, long-term, Dynasty or not. There's a lot that applies here. Talking about fantasy backs, yeah. Devon Achane, I think, has a future for sure because I looked up his profile, right? Track star at Texas A&M, lots of speed. If you get that man out in the open field, we saw games early this year, like no one's touching him. So I don't know. Would you bet that he's probably their guy for the next 5 years as long as he stays healthy?
I would say so. And going back on Mostert and why I think he had such a successful year, I think having that split backfield really benefited him a lot. And I think he could be someone to watch out for next year as well, just because they're going to have that dual threat back there, the double-headed monster, as I like to say. And that just seems to be something that Miami has, two-headed monsters everywhere, wideouts and running backs. So it's something to look out for, especially because Mostert, like you said, is getting up there in age, his injury history, but having Achane there as like a second guy, it really benefits both people because Achane's not out there all the time, and neither is Mostert.
I think for Mostert's career, even including this year, you can still count on two hands the amount of 20 rush games he's had. So the fact that Miami's kind of keyed into that and went, all right, this guy's extremely injury prone. He is 31 years old, but he's still so fast because the fact of the matter is Raheem Mostert probably has the legs outside of the injuries of like a 27 or 28-year-old. He hasn't played a lot of games in the NFL for someone who is 31. The fact that one of the rare occasions here of a split back system helping him led him to having this year, I'm curious where he's going to be valued at. Are people going to take him in the second round, late first? I don't know if I'd go there, but I'm not going to avoid Raheem Mostert like the plague, right? Because as you brought up, Dylan, the first time that he was really thrown in is you will not be the main back. We will take some of your carries away. San Francisco tried it. Miami did it, and he feels good and looks good and is putting up those numbers. I think there might be a future for a year or two. He's not going to be a long-term guy. There's not many Frank Gores out there, and Mostert is definitely not Frank Gore. But, no, that's a good point, right? The fact that he's splitting carries helped him out. Let's go to this last one, and then we'll open everything up here. Folks, if you're just dropping in, going over 2023, looking ahead to 2024, Cory Sparks with you as per usual. Dylan Przybylski, director, broadcaster, and fantasy extraordinaire for today, is on here as well. He'll probably make more appearances just to eat up some time here in what I'm going to call Dynasty season. Maybe we'll do some drafts going forward, power rankings. This is just the start, and we thought what better way to start than to look back, reflect, and then look forward. So any questions you have that we're not answering, feel free to pop those in the live chat. Of course, like and subscribe if you have not already. Tyjae Spears to the moon. I just threw a short up on him as well as to why. Pretty dang obvious. The initial reason. Derrick Henry makes a post-game announcement after Tennessee beat Jacksonville 28-20 and destroyed the Jaguars' playoff hopes after they started 8-3. And he basically says, "Thank you everybody for all of your support. It's been a great 8 years." And without saying it, I'm done. He's done in Tennessee. Maybe he goes to the Ravens. Maybe he goes somewhere else. Your guess is as good as mine. His backup, Tyjae Spears. In my opinion, you cannot find 30 running backs that are better than him. 4.5 yards a carry, 838 yards of offense, equal amount. I mean, we're talking CMC ratio, like rookie year, equal amount of rushing and receiving yards, about 400 of each. Very impressive stuff, PPR especially, and that's kind of a dimension we didn't see with Derrick Henry. Now, who did Derrick Henry work under? Vrabel, ground and pound. I'm going to turn that into the play action, use guys like Ryan Tannehill for rollouts and go from there. I think it's not a huge coincidence that when Derrick Henry left, Tennessee went, all right, well, this offense was kind of built around him. This team was built around him. Let's reset. I think Tyjae Spears did enough. I don't know. Do you think they go out and draft someone, or do you think he was good enough to give him a year with the backfield somewhat to himself?
I wouldn't be shocked if they draft in like the 4th or 5th round,
Right.
like just a depth guy. But I think Spears has the role as the number 1 back in Tennessee right now. But like the Packers, like you see this all the time, like Aaron Jones was the number 1 guy. 2 years into his career, they draft A.J. Dillon.
Right.
It's just kind of a depth thing, and they might need to pair it because Spears is kind of like Aaron Jones, where he can catch and run. So they might pair a bigger back and do a split back with Spears to really enhance that offense more. It all depends on who the next coach is, in my opinion, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Vrabel's the best coach on the market right now. Obviously, he just left the nest, so he's not going to go there. A few options out there. Hopefully they don't go the Frank Reich route. I don't know if he's going to have a job next year. Panthers did him bogus, in my opinion. He had nothing to work with, but different episode for that. Interesting thing with Spears, right? You mentioned he's kind of the Aaron Jones type pass catcher. Do they find somebody in the 4th or 5th round who's a bruiser? Do they find somebody who might poach a few touchdowns? I don't know. But when Aaron Jones was healthy, a lot of people I think were concerned when Green Bay went out and got A.J. Dillon. Is this guy going to take away from Aaron Jones? And he really didn't. Like, out of all the split back systems, I have to compliment Green Bay the most. Aaron Jones still got his. And if anything, he was more involved as a pass catcher. So, I don't know. Like, yes, Tyjae Spears probably didn't do enough to have the backfield to himself. I don't think anyone's getting 30 carries a game anymore. I think those days are gone, especially with injuries. But I don't know. I think even if they go out and get the right bruiser, my question for you is this. We talk a lot about rookies. Let's wait for the draft. Don't draft somebody blind. I don't care where Caleb Williams goes. Don't get him now. Is Tyjae Spears' value kind of dependent on what they do in the draft? Like, would you wait till after April to see what kind of running back are they getting?
I honestly think his value is kind of stuck right now.
It is what it is.
It's kind of in that weird spot, like you were saying, where the draft is kind of dependent on what Spears does, especially like for production wise. I personally wouldn't be mad if Tennessee gets a bruiser back, because if it is a 4th or 5th round pick, it's probably going to be a project and probably they won't see a lot of time on the field, maybe like a 3rd down back.
Right.
But even if they use him as a 3rd down back, they're probably going to still sign a veteran to take some goal line carries. So his value in that, like thinking ahead like that, if they do get a free agent, if they do draft someone in the 4th or 5th round, that does really derail his value just a tad. I don't think it derails it fully, but it does send it down a little bit.
Yeah, and it's like, I think where they draft somebody is really going to matter a lot too, because even though Green Bay made it work perfect from the get-go, A.J. Dillon for a backup RB2 on a team was getting a decent amount. He was I want to say 2nd rounder, right? I think he was a high 2nd rounder. It was the same year they got Love. So yeah, I remember everyone like yelling at Goody, going, "What on earth are you doing?" And look what happened. Now everything looks okay. You know, the grass was greener on the other side. Yeah, I think draft stock kind of depends, right? If They go out and get a running back in the second round. I think we're sending a message here that there's a contest for, okay, who's going to be the RB1? If they go out and, like you said, get a bruiser in the 4th or 5th round, I would say we can make an argument. We're extending his career. Maybe we want Tyjae Spears around for the next 6-7 years because all of a sudden he has someone to offset him. There's guys out there who have kind of been journeymen who could serve that same role. Keep an eye on Deontay Foreman. He used to be the backup for Derrick Henry. He's a free agent. Chicago signed him to a 1-year deal. They haven't extended him yet. So that could be interesting. But yeah, I agree with what you said. It kind of depends on like who they get, and then that's going to determine what Spears does.
Yeah, and the real reason I'm saying that if they do get a running back, it'll be a later round pick just because I think they need to fill more holes on that team. Like receiver is one of the big ones that I would really recommend getting someone there because they just have no one on at the receiver end. And then their defense is kind of shaky. So that's why like the earlier picks I can see them spending on the defense, maybe a wideout or two, maybe a tight end as well. And then that later like 5th, 6th area is where they would pull the trigger on a running back that they would really want.
Right, not even argue. I don't think it's the most dire need. Do they have an answer at quarterback yet? Like, they went back to Ryan Tannehill the last couple games because all of a sudden, Will Levis, people figured him out on film. You know, he had those first couple really good games, and then the consistency wasn't there. I don't know if they have it in their heart to do it because 2 years ago, they got Malik Willis in the 3rd round. Last year, they got Will Levis in the 2nd round. Do you really just start caking on draft stock on the same position when, like you said, who do they have outside of DeAndre Hopkins right now? Big Treylon Burks fan here. Don't get me wrong, but he can't stay on the field. Okonkwo looks good. Cool, there's your tight end, who was mainly brought in to block for Derrick Henry. He's gone. So, yeah, maybe they go up and get Neighbors. Maybe they go up and improve the defensive front. I think Tyjae Spears not only is going to have his stock, if you will, determined by who they get at the running back position, it's going to be everywhere. What if the quarterback position's not solved? Maybe they do run it more. But then again, what if they suck and they have to throw it 50 times a game? It's kind of like, yeah, where's it going to go, right?
Yeah, there's no consistency with Tennessee at all.
Right. Yeah, not at all. And they were a good team for a while. Had an AFC title game 5-6 years ago under Vrabel, I want to say. They took out the Patriots in Tom Brady's last game as a Patriot before he went to the Bucs for a couple of years. So, you know, some good accomplishments there. We will open the floor up to this. And of course, folks, if you're just joining in, I'm Cory. That is Dylan. Dylan joining the channel today for, we'll probably wrap this thing up in the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on your questions. We're reviewing 2023, looking ahead to 2024. You guys have asked a lot of great questions today. I challenge you to do this next. Throw suggestions in there. What do you want to see going forward? I'll think of stuff. Don't worry about that. There will be content. But if you would like to control what it's going to be, if you want to see off-season quarterback rankings, if you want to see potential rookie rankings, if you want to see me and Dylan mock it up and go through the first round of the draft and kind of determine the fantasy landscape from there, I don't know. Let us know. We can also do, I had a cool idea, rank teams by fantasy value. Who's the best, most fantasy-heavy team? We can do that. Any suggestions you have, throw it in the live chat. Again, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Eric's contributing here. Running back draft class is not very deep. No real standouts. Could definitely be some running backs available in those mid-rounds. So that's an interesting angle, right? I am kind of just starting my college research, if you will, now that the games are done. If there's no one to reach for, I think we can kind of go to bed knowing Tyjae Spears, barring anything crazy, is probably the guy. Unless, you know, training camp goes nuts. So good to know.
I think I mentioned that before we went live too, that the running back class isn't very deep.
You did.
So that's very, very funny that was brought up as well.
Same wavelength, Eric. Keep it up, man. Keep up the good work. All right, we will open up the floor to this. I do not have a graphic for it. Just general conversation that I thought of. Coach landing spots. Any predictions on who goes where? We kind of talked about this with Fields and how that impacts fantasy. Like landing spots for, let's say, Atlanta. Coaches to go there. Do you like Vrabel? Do you like, I don't know. What do you think's going to go on there? No Vrabel?
I like Belichick going to the Falcons.
That is something. So you don't think he's done?
I don't think so. I think he loves coaching too much.
That's fair. And it's like, he doesn't show it, right? He doesn't show a ton of emotion. But I don't think there are many individuals out there who are more competitive than Bill Belichick. Great minds think alike. There you go, Eric. Does Bill Belichick really want to hang up his career on, I don't even know what to call this season yet. I'm still taking it in. Mac Jones, then Bailey Zappi, then maybe Mac Jones again, and then we limped to the end with Bailey Zappi. I don't even know what their defense was actually decent. Maybe that's the highlight of their season. They didn't have a good year. So you're thinking Bill keeps it going. You think he goes to Atlanta. Interesting thing about that I like. Bill Belichick, historically, they run the ball first. Even with Tom Brady, in his prime, he would air it out a little bit. They always had a solid run game. They never really invested in a great running back. Ramondre's been pretty good. Zeke's been surprising people. But imagine Bill Belichick takes that persona they took a couple years ago when he took Mac Jones to the playoffs. They got first rounded by the Bills, and you just run the crap out of the ball with Bijan. That's good news to me, right? And then Eric saying Dan Quinn to the Seahawks, Vrabel going to the Pats if Belichick leaves. Good one, right? In-house hire. Is that where you think Vrabel goes then?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I could see Vrabel going to.
Washington's open.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind the Chargers with Vrabel.
Air it out a little bit. That's going to be interesting.
I know he's a ground and pound guy, but like the Chargers would be such an interesting dynamic because you have a quarterback that can air it out a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I think Justin Herbert is obviously, we said this before we went on the air today. Justin Herbert's the least of that team's worries right now. Their worries are durability at the wide receiver position. They invested in a first rounder this year in Quentin Johnston. I don't know if that could have gone worse. That was almost Kevin White bad. And Kevin White bad is about as bad as it can get. I don't know if you remember him. He was from West Virginia, had one really good year, ran the fastest 40-yard dash in the combine. The Bears got him, and I think he has like 25 career receptions. So Quentin Johnston has serious drop issues. But I wouldn't hate Vrabel going over there and maybe testing out his versatility a little bit. He was a Patriot, so that's kind of why I said in-house hire, but that team is definitely a project. Dan Quinn to the Seahawks. My question for you, Eric, if you're still watching, do they get their quarterback of the future this year then? And I can ask you this as well, Dylan. What do you think? I mean, Geno Smith has been phenomenal. One of the best comeback stories ever. Perseverance. A backup for what? Almost a decade. But he's not going to get any younger. Do you think they go out and draft somebody this year? Late round?
I think they kind of have to.
Right?
Because their backup is my fantasy savior, Drew Lock. I had to start him in a game. I had to start him.
Is it the backpack game? Probably.
It was the game where Geno was hurt and he came in.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, it was just crazy. So, but he's not the answer either. Drew Lock. I think there's so much quarterback issues with Seattle that I think it's time to actually draft one.
Yeah. I'd have to agree. They got lucky with Russ for a while. Russ cooked for over a decade. He left. Drew Lock was supposed to get his second chance in Seattle, and then Geno beats him out in camp, and we've got that there. Not sure what Seattle's draft position is. I mean, just missed the playoffs, so we're probably talking, if I had to guess, 15, 16, 17, somewhere in there, right? They finished 9-8. The Cardinals did them bogus. I don't know if you saw. On their video board, as the game is ending, the Seahawks needed the Packers to lose. Otherwise, didn't matter if they won. Their playoff hopes were done. That's what happened. Packers game ends. They beat the Bears, and with about 30 seconds left, right before Seattle kicks the game-winning field goal, right before Matt Prater shanks it, the Cardinals put that game result on the board. They put the Packers have won, like very clearly sending the message that it doesn't matter what happens, you're done. I'm like, dude, what the? Yeah, so that happened. But yeah, Eric, I would guess they're around that 14 to 16 range. Yeah.
Cory, I got a question for you.
Yeah, fire.
So I know you watched the national championship.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh, does he go back to the NFL?
So landing spots. Flus is staying, so it cannot be to the Bears, who he was a member of about 30 years ago. So who's open? The Commanders, the Chargers without Staley, the Falcons, presumably the Patriots. Does Harbaugh go back? I mean, your stock's as high as ever, right? He proved he can do it in the NFL. He's proving he can do it in college football. I think he goes back. I think he joins his brother. Imagine if the Ravens win the whole thing this year, by the way. Harbaugh, winner of Natty Championship. Harbaugh, winner of Super Bowl. Not long after they faced each other in the Super Bowl. I want to say 9-10 years ago. I think he comes back. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's almost time that he comes back. I feel like he had this like hidden goal of like winning a national championship before he came back to the NFL.
Yeah.
But I think he comes back.
It wasn't long ago that Michigan was like struggling to make bowl games. So he rebuilt and got the recruiting atmosphere going and firing on all cylinders pretty quickly there. I kind of like the Chargers for a landing spot. I mean, you talk about teams that need a lot of things. He would not have to worry about a quarterback. And you think about it in the past, did Jim Harbaugh ever really have a great quarterback? He had Lamar for a tiny bit. He had Joe Flacco. His specialty was building everything else. Well, if there is ever a team that needs anything but a quarterback right now, it's the Chargers. They are in dire need of a defense that can actually produce. They spent so much money on Derwin James, Khalil Mack, everybody, Joey Bosa, right? And yet they're still getting in shootouts. I think maybe Chargers. Eric saying, not sure what, the Seahawks draft position is. So maybe a Penix, Bo Nix, who was in college forever. He's this year's Stetson Bennett. J.J. McCarthy, if he's still available. McCarthy is going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going to translate. No knock to him at all. When is the last time we saw a team run the ball as much as Michigan does? And very well, by the way. But what did McCarthy have to do? Not much, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, he didn't really do much this season, and again, very reliant on that running game. Right. Michigan was this year.
Blake Corum and then Donovan Edwards. I turned the game on late, and I see Donovan Edwards, 3 carries for 90-plus yards. And I'm like, what? So, and right, he's not going to have the issue of going to a team first overall. McCarthy won't. So you don't have to have the immediate worry about going to one of the worst teams in the NFL. But yeah, it's like, I feel like you're taking kind of a gamble with McCarthy. So Eric's saying McCarthy to the Seahawks. Now that might be like that long-term answer where we know, all right, regardless of what happens contractually, we're going to get 2 to 3 more good years out of Geno. So then we do that. Penix is interesting. Phenomenal talent. Crazy injury issues. And then you kind of have the polished Bo Nix, who has been in the, almost said NFL, been in college football for a while. I don't know. If you're Seattle, what do you do, Dylan?
Honestly, if they would draft McCarthy, it would kind of be like a Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers situation where you kind of let him sit behind Geno for a little bit.
Right.
And then like that's your long-term answer and Geno's kind of your short-term answer. I kind of like that.
I kind of like it too. And, apples to oranges. The Seahawks are not the most dominant team in the entire NFL when it comes to running the football. It's not like the 49ers. I don't think anyone's going to be taking that quarterback job anytime soon. But Kenneth Walker III's a dog, and they did use a second rounder on Zach Charbonnet last year. So you got a team that clearly prioritizes the run, doesn't need to throw the ball 40 times a game. Maybe McCarthy lives well there, and all of a sudden that play action he's doing in Michigan, they would, in order to make this work, they have to invest in offensive linemen too, because Geno got pressured a decent amount. But yeah, maybe you kind of build up the play action and do that for sure. I'm trying to think of anything else we can cover. Otherwise, we can jump off. I just want to make sure anyone who's jumping in right now, open forum. We're answering any of your questions as we leave 2023 in the past, go into 2024. If you're in Dynasty Fantasy Football, we really don't stop. So any current questions you're concerned about heading into the draft, the coach firings, what on earth do I do with DJ Moore if Justin stays, goes, or anything in between, feel free to ask that as well. Shout out Eric, really putting the grind into the chat right now. I appreciate it, man. Andy was carrying it for a bit. We had Johnny, we had Prey, we had TS. So good variety today, folks. I do appreciate it. I guess anything you want to cover at all?
I want to retract my Vrabel prediction, and I want to say he goes to Seattle because of the running game.
That's right. Carroll did just leave today. Well, he's an advisor. They gave him some title that kept him in the organization, but he's not a coach anymore. Interesting. Vrabel, McCarthy late, and then all of a sudden, obviously McCarthy's not going to develop overnight. All of a sudden, you kind of have the same identity that the Titans were playing with, right? Working on your secondary. You run the ball well. Yeah.
Yeah, because the play action that McCarthy runs at Michigan, pretty much what Tannehill did with the Titans with Henry, it'd be pretty carbon copy, but that's like the most identical team to a ground and pound team that Vrabel would find, I think.
Right. Because if you go to the Chargers, you're out of Austin Eckler, presumably very soon. If you go to Washington, I believe they were the most throw-heavy team in the NFL this year, and that's really because their defense gave up almost 30 a game. If you go to the Patriots, they like to run the ball, but again, that's a project. So he's really going to have to love where he grew up playing, because that's going to take a while to make that team good. Yeah, I kind of like that. Seahawks fit, throw McCarthy in there. If you go out and get Penix, you're taking a risk with the injuries, but you are getting a talent that I think is pretty polished. Nix, I think, lies somewhere in between. We'll do a draft board maybe at some point. I think we can put a bow on this. Questions are kind of dying down. We went through our lessons, and then going into 2024. This video does get archived, folks, so if you have any questions at all, just toss them in there. I'm pretty good about getting back to you. Otherwise, Discord in the description below. I'll probably answer a little better in live time there. Dylan, thanks for jumping on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We could definitely do this again if you would like. Probably not Amber. Really? Amber right at the end. Amber, what's going on? I think that's Amber. I don't know many Amber G's in the universe. You like the double box? Anyway. So yeah, Dylan, I appreciate you coming on. Maybe we can do some power rankings going forward, do a tier list of some sort. We will come up with new ideas. If you have any new ideas for us going forward, future streams, future videos, by all means, feel free. Do what it says in the ticker, if you will. Follow us on Twitter for different updates. Follow Dylan on Twitter. Help him get a little clout for coming on here and being an amazing guest and adding some analysis. Amber says nothing much in the chat. I hope all of you are doing amazing. Tomorrow and every day, we put up YouTube shorts, but tomorrow we have a video coming out where I'm predicting every game of the NFL playoffs, and then we'll really start to get into the swing of Dynasty. This was kind of the unofficial kickoff. So, folks, I hope you have a wonderful night. This has been another Armchair Fantasy Football live stream, and we will see you in the next one.